Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. Yes.
Second, let me start by sharing. Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai.
Go ahead, Shilpi. Let's
Three
start
of
with the
yes. We'll start with that. Uh, Hafiz's sayings. Three of Meher Baba's favorite couplets of Hafiz, a mystical Persian poet, befitting a fortunate slave, carry out every command of the master without any question of why and what. About what you hear from the master, never say it is wrong, because, my dear, the fault lies in your own incapacity to understand him. I am slave of the master who has released me from ignorance. Whatever my master does is of the highest benefit to all concerned. Hafiz, Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. Over to you, Karthik.
yeah, sure. Thank you. So we stopped at just before Baba went to Kashmir. So let's start from that point on. Are you in a position you prefer reading in the early part of the call, right?
Yeah,
Ashokji.
yeah.
Yeah, you want to read
Journey.
for some time?
Yeah, I'll read for
Yeah.
some time.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Please go ahead.
Journey into Kashmir. A child's dream highlights a trip which Baba and his disciples made at this time to Srinagar in Kashmir. The day of Baba's arrival in this beautiful city, the 4-year-old child of a boat housekeeper had told his father of an impressive dream he had had the night before. A man, whom the child thought to be God, had come to him and told him that he was coming to rent his father's boathouse. Go find this God and bring him to our house. The little fellow implored his father. The man, however, went on about his business, paying no attention to the child's importuning. Later in the day, Baba and his party arrived in Srinagar, and after looking over a number of houses, he selected the one belonging to the father of this child. At that moment, the little boy appeared and, with unmistakable joy, declared loudly to his astonished parent, Father, this is the very God I saw in my dream. From Srinagar, Baba took his group to Harwan at the foothills of Himalayas. Here, in a hut specially built for him, he retired into seclusion for 4 days. This particular hill is of special interest, for it was here, Baba tells us, that the body of Jesus was buried after having been brought from Palestine by his disciples Thaddeus and Bartholomew. Jesus, before the crucifixion, had given specific instruction to these disciples concerning the disposition of his physical body after, after he had given it up. Corroborating part of the story is a tradition that these two disciples were known to have been in India shortly after crucifixion. Baba told us that the body in which Jesus was seen after the resurrection was his spiritual body and not the gross form, as many people are inclined to believe. The spiritual body, Baba relates, is not a ghostly, ephemeral form, but partakes of all the physical characters and whatever degree of density the master chooses to give it. Third trip to Persia. In September of this year, Baba left with a group of 12 of his disciples on the third trip to Persia. As usual, he traveled third class, sleeping on deck. Among the stewards, who were Goanese Roman Catholics of Portuguese descent, was one who attended to Baba's going and coming from Bath in second class, which had been arranged for him by a devotee. One day he asked a disciple who accompanied Baba, Who is this saintly person? Is he your living Christ? On board, Baba's identity was not disclosed, and he saw no one outside of his own party, except a Mohammedan member of the engine room crew who used to go daily to Baba and stand silently in worship before him for a few moments. On the last day of the voyage, Baba gave him his handkerchief, which brought tears of joy to the man's eyes. Baba proclaimed in Persia. This trip to Persia differed from the others in that Baba and his party received a very cordial welcome from rich and poor alike. Though his visit had not been advertised in advance, the news of his arrival spread like bushfire, with the result that all their shopping places he was greeted by throngs of worshippers, which included some of the highest ranking government officials and military officers. These men declared themselves as believing that Baba's presence in their country was a symbol of its redemption, which could only be achieved through the agency of the masters of perfection. In their zeal, they wanted to arrange for their king, Reza Shah, to meet Baba and publicly proclaim him as their country's spiritual benefactor. This, however, Baba did not wish. One private reception was given in Yazd by a leading merchant of the city, but the townspeople soon got news of Baba's presence and crowded into the grounds by the thousands. A number of people narrowly escaped serious injury as the eager throng pushed their way toward Baba. They might see and, if possible, touch him. One significant incident occurred when an important leader of the Baha'i sect arrived by airplane from Shiraz. His purpose in coming was to question Baba, but when he saw the master and felt his divine radiation, he prostrated himself at Baba's feet, crying, "You are God." And as he rushed through the crowd, he proclaimed, "I have seen God." In this recognition of Baba's spiritual status, he was revealing his own high development, since God can only be recognized by one in whom God is awakened. He was also exemplifying the teaching of the great Baha'i founders to acknowledge God wherever one finds him. Another evidence of the understanding with which Baba was greeted on this trip was given at Bam, where the master and his disciples were resting for a few days. A man in military uniform with several stripes on his chest asked permission to see the master. At first, he was told by one of Baba's men that no private interviews were being given, but the officer insisted that the Holy One be informed that a beggar was outside asking alms of him. When told this, Baba consented to see him. The officer marched in, but with his hands folded reverently across his chest. He saluted the master in military fashion. Then he removed his sword and fell upon his knees, kissing Baba's proffered hand with reverence. When Baba asked who he was, he replied, "Your humble slave." To Baba's repeated query, he answered, "I am nothing in the presence of your holiness." Then Baba explained that he wished to know his military rank. "A general," the man replied humbly. "To die in the service of one's country is great indeed, but to die in the service of God is greater." Baba told him, "Indeed, Holy Master, I understand." The man agreed and implored Baba's grace in his search of God. Baba assured him of his help. The general then declared that though he belonged to a Persian army, he believed that the salvation of his country lay not in his military strength but in spiritual rebirth. He besought Baba's help on behalf of his unfortunate country and its ignorant people. "That is why you see me here," Baba assured him. One more incident illumines his trip for us. In the street opposite to the house where Baba stayed while in Bam was the seat of headquarters of a saint or Buzurg, as such a one is known in Persia. He was held in great reverence by the local people and had a large following. The first evening when Baba appeared for a walk with his disciples, the saint arose from his seat and paid his respects to Baba, whom he seemed to know. Later, he told all those who approached him that there was in their midst the emperor of all saints. Testing and tempering. The
So,
Persian trip was
just to point,
pause. Yeah,
can you
yeah,
hear me?
yeah. Pause.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to check if you know about who's that Baha'i master who came and met Baba and declared him to be God. Would be interesting to know because I have not heard of this particular incident before.
Yeah.
And of course, I
I,
heard the episode that was described
yeah.
in
Exa-
this chapter.
Agreed. It is something unique and it's worth researching. Even I don't know.
Have you heard of this before?
No. I have heard about references to Kashmir, but I've
No
not
problem.
heard of this.
Let's let's continue.
Yeah.
Sure. No
Te-
problem. Let's continue.
yeah. Jay Baba. Uh, Testing and tempering. The Persian trip was not, however, without the difficulties and trials usually attend upon Baba's work. The negative forces of illusion, which many good people think it well to deny, Baba uses even as he does the positive forces to teach necessary lessons to his followers. To be comfortable is certainly not an objective which Baba fosters in his close associates. In fact, as one looks back over the years of contact with him and hears and reads of the experience of his other devotees and disciples, one must admit that one object of training is to develop in us the capacity to endure hardship or pain cheerfully, to accept the dark side of life as complementary to the light, not as opposing it, to integrate into one's conscious life and to raise it to a higher potential, to cultivate a kind of divine patience in bearing of tension and overcoming of disappointment and unfulfilled desires. He sees and experiences life as a whole, and it is what he trains his disciples also to do. But it should not be thought that this is merely stoical training for grim endurance. The most severe hardships are shot through with shafts of redeeming light and compensating love. As the pilgrim advances, the opposites. You can just raise the screen.
You're not able to see it.
No, the last line I can see is as the pilgrim advances, the opposites.
I'm halfway there. It's now the first line. As the pilgrim advances, is the first line. I think
Yes.
there's some problem with your internet.
No, then I think Karthik, in all
Yeah, I'll
fairness,
continue. Yeah, thank you.
Jai Baba.
Avtar Meher Baba ki jai. As the pilgrim advances, the opposites tend more and more to merge into a whole, so that joy is seen to be but the other side of pain and is only realized in its fullness as one's capacity to endure suffering deepens. No, following such a master as Baba is not a comfortable experience. Of necessity, the desire for comfort must be relinquished. The journey is an adventure for hardy souls who are fully prepared to endure the hardships of the pilgrimage with hearts courageous and true because they know that the goal toward which they are being skillfully led by their master is fair country of perfected consciousness in which the individual becomes permanently aware of his true God self. So from Persia, the next subsection is perils of the desert. Such hearts were those of Baba's group who accompanied him on the return trip through the Persian desert. The main outlets from Persia are by sea, but for a reason which later becomes apparent, Baba chose the land route and the frontier station of Dusda, which involved great dangers and risks. A private bus was chartered for the party and an expert mechanic engaged as the driver. Baba particularly stipulated that for spiritual reasons, not a single package or piece of luggage other than theirs was to be carried on the bus. To this, the driver agreed, but just before starting from Bam, when Baba sent one of his men to see that his instructions had been carried out, he discovered that the driver had tucked in underneath 2 bags of almond shells. The driver made the excuse that they were light, but Baba was displeased. The man had broken his promise. Baba said nothing to the man, however, and insisted they start at once on their long journey. The disciples, knowing from long past experience that when an order of Baba's is disobeyed, trouble ensues, were prepared for anything, and true to form, difficulties were not long in developing. The bus was practically new, as were also the tires, but within an hour they had 2 punctures, to the utter amazement of the driver. Then suddenly something went askew with the radiator. Steam poured out through the cap, though water had just been poured in. Upon inspection, there seemed to be no visible reason for the radiator to steam, and the driver became even more puzzled. Again, he poured in water, and off they started, but within a few minutes, steam again seeped out through the cap. Completely baffled, the driver stopped and examined the motor. This time he discovered a crack at the bottom of the radiator through which the water was trickling out. Creeping along at a tortoise pace, they reached the next oasis in safety. Here, the driver worked all night trying to repair the damage. But in such an isolated desert village, it was impossible to get the necessary materials for the job. For 2 more days, he continued trying, and finally, with ingenuity, he made a paste of powder and white of egg, which he spread over the crack. Repeatedly, as he worked, he was heard to mutter, Ya Allah, oh my God, I have never had such an experience before. But now he was sure he had found the solution to the problem. He started the engine, and all went well for a few minutes. Then the water began to ooze through the crack. In this moment of despair, a sudden realization dawned upon him, and he fled to the room of one of the disciples, crying, Brother, I see now why all this has happened. I broke my promise to your master, and this mishap is the result of my ignorance and folly. I feel ashamed to face him. Won't you plead for me, please? The disciple understood and sympathized. The man was taken to Baba, who forgave him with this admonition. Never disregard the instruction of a master, and never break your word to anyone. Baba then told him to return to Bam, to drive slowly, and to bring back another bus immediately. With the leaking radiator, the trip seemed impossible to the driver, but Baba told him not to worry and assured him he would see that he reached his destination safely. It seemed like a hopeless undertaking to the man, but he accepted Baba's encouragement and started back on the 4-hour journey, which he made without further mishap. True to his promise, he secured another bus, but he sent it back with another driver. He had evidently had enough discipline for the time being. Through this experience of marking time in the scorching heat of a desert village, the Mandali learned to what length Baba would go or subject his disciples in order to teach one soul and necessary lesson. With the new bus and driver, they resumed their trip across the burning sands. Two of them were so ill they had to lie prone on the seats, while others were crammed in like sardines, unable to move for hours at a time. About 100 pieces of luggage of all sizes and shapes filled every corner. There were kujas, earthen water pots filled with water, which must be kept in upright positions. Upon these jars depended their water supply for the remainder of the trip. When the wheels of the bus stuck in the sand, they had to untie the heavy planks resting on the top of the bus and force them under the wheels of the truck. Sweating, tired, and thirsty after the strenuous work, they would squeeze themselves into the bus again. Their throats would be parched with thirst, yet because their water supply was so limited, they could only moisten their lips. They had no idea when the ordeal would be over, but trusting in Baba and knowing he was sharing this painful and hazardous adventure with them, they were confident he would bring them through in safety. The driver warned them that it would be at least 6 days before they would reach their destination. He was tired and nervous and complained of pains all over his body. He vowed he would not continue. But Baba, with loving encouragement, pushed him on, and when it seemed he had missed the track in the sand, Baba would advise him which direction to take. Much to the driver's amazement, they arrived at their destination in 3 days instead of the 6 he had predicted. He had been crossing this desert for years, and even under the best conditions with the lightest load, had never completed the journey in less than 5 days. Under adverse conditions, such as he considered the present trip to be, it often took 10 to 12 days. 6 months later, when one of these disciples was in the British consulate in Bombay arranging for the passport of another of Baba's circle, he learned from the official there that Dusbad, the frontier station, was the only one through which Baba could possibly have passed without signing his signature to the visa. It will be remembered that he stopped writing some years before. Through the main seaports, he could never have passed without all the required red tape. Now, the disciples knew why he had chosen out of the way Dusbad and the difficult desert route instead of the ocean route. Wow. So those of you who just joined, I saw both of you, Kama and Ashish, joined. So Baba takes a 7 day or maybe a little more journey across Persia coming back. And nobody does that because most of the people exit Persia through the sea route. And Baba specifically took the Dusbad route, and then they had a fun experience on the drive back because the bus driver didn't listen to Baba, didn't follow his instructions, and then he paid the price by a new bus taking a longer time to get fixed. It had repairs, and finally they had a replacement bus which brought them across the border. The point is, he did all this so that he does not break his vow or his. This effort was to ensure he doesn't have to sign. Fascinating. Any comments?
Yeah, so there's also a hint of a miracle because a trip which normally takes 5 to 7 days was done in 3 days.
Yeah. So there are multiple levels of miracles, right? How can a new bus have a broken radiator overnight and then two punctures within the first 1 hour? So yeah, so miracles need not be positive. Miracles are just suspension of physical laws that we are used to.
Absolutely.
Uh, uh, and these are obviously things that used to. Okay, let's continue. The Master and the Magdalenes. Upon his return from Persia, Baba made Nasik his headquarters, radiating from there on continued journeys, which included a trip to the Himalayas and another to Persia. While in that country, he visited one of the sacred places of pilgrimage to which people from all parts of Persia, journeyed to pay tribute to Imam, one of the 12 disciples of the Prophet Muhammad. One day, while there, Baba and three of his disciples were followed by two women. When they arrived at their quarters, Baba asked the women to come in. He then removed the covering which he wore over his head as a disguise and bade the women, whom he recognized to be prostitutes, to sit near him while he talked lovingly to them of spiritual things and advised them to give up their way of life. He gently touched their faces with his hand as he poured upon them the radiance of his divine love. The women, feeling deeply stirred by the profound purity of the Master's presence, wept bitterly and promised they would never again pollute the bodies which his redeeming hand had blessed. Baba, even as Jesus is beyond sex, as he is beyond all opposites, though he uses the principle underlying it for his cosmic gain. His teaching states that the whole created universe is the product of the law of magnetism, attraction, and repulsion. If his skill in using this law is as great in cosmic spheres as it is in the field of training disciples, and I have no doubt that it must be vast indeed. Once, when asked by a London reporter if he were married, he smiled and replied that for him, sex did not exist. Perhaps this accounts in part for his freedom from complications with the sex-ridden women who found the footsteps of most spiritual teachers. Though I have seen many of this type approach Baba, it seems as though in his presence a transmutation of lower desires instantly takes place. He explained to us once in India, my mind is like the ocean. All the good and bad in the universe are drowned in it. If you think good thoughts, I absorb them. If you think bad ones, I absorb them too. If filth gets into the water of a small pool, it pollutes it. But if the filth flows into the ocean, it is absorbed by it and is no longer filth. Your limited minds become stagnant with a few bad thoughts, but even universal bad thoughts cannot affect my ocean-like mind. Divine detachment. Just as Baba is unaffected by the evil in the world, which expresses itself in lustful thoughts or actions, so is he unperturbed by it when it takes the form of slander against himself. He knows that all spiritual work is strengthened by opposition. The fun of the game lies in meeting resistance, facing, and transcending it. Baba's attitude toward the spoken or written defamations directed against him is one of bored indifference. I consider all who are not God realized as mad and pay no attention to what they do or say about me or my work, favorable or otherwise. He once told us that when we were discussing a book which had just been published, in which the author had displayed his negative projection against Baba. People who speak ill of me should not be condemned. They too are unconsciously serving my work because they often think of me. From Baba's detached viewpoint, this resistance intensifies the spiritual current of his work. That Baba is an enigma which puzzles the rational mind is a fact substantiated by all of his closest associates. It is not therefore surprising that those who judge others in terms of their limited perceptions should project upon Baba their own limitations. All of us who are close to the Master have confessed our inability to understand many of his methods, but it seems wholly immature to condemn what one does not understand. The ill-founded criticisms which have sometimes been leveled against Baba serve as boomerangs against the critics. In the words of Frank Lafarge, the celebrated painter, no man judges a work of art. It judges him. It is Baba's function to stir up the unconscious forces in man, dark as well as light. And if for a time the negative forces seem to predominate in an individual, he will inevitably project them upon the master. Some people, particularly his own countrymen, are outraged because he does not fit their preconceived pattern of a master. They forget that a master does not follow patterns, he breaks them. Wow. Okay. True seeker of God. In contrast to such critics was the reaction of Mr. C. Like, upon whom Baba made a quite a different impression, no doubt due to the fact that he came as a humble devotee seeking God, not as one overburdened by prejudice and opinion. He had left Europe with Swami Vivekananda's famous Song of the Sannyasin ringing in his heart and inspiring him with the high ideals of discipleship which it proclaimed. But after a year in the modern ashram in the Himalayas, he discovered how great is often the discrepancy between the ideals of the master and the practice of those who follow after him. Orthodox external observances were strictly adhered to, but the spirit of the true renunciation was missing. He had been a spiritual disciple of the late Sri Ramakrishna, another perfect master of the last century, and was inwardly directed by him to leave the Himalayan retreat and go to the Master Baba. When his companions heard of his decision, they tried their utmost to dissuade him. He would, they assured him, be hypnotized by Baba and paraded by him as a European convert to further his propaganda. At first, he would be full of enthusiasm, but soon this would dwindle. Consequently, he was somewhat bewildered when he arrived at Mehrabad in October 1928. But how utterly different I found Meher Baba and his ashram to be, he wrote. The master is a personification of the highest spirituality and love, and the atmosphere of Meher Ashram reflects the deep peace and radiance of my beloved master, Baba, as he is affectionately called by the devotees. There is nothing about him of the awe-inspiring solemnity that is attributed to the occult hierarchy. That love which all my life I have craved, here I experience more and more as the days pass. One day Baba said he would help me by awakening in my heart the realization of his divine presence. And later this happened. I became aware of the self as the self of all beings. And I know also that the one we call Baba has always been with me and will ever be for all eternity. Then he added, truly, it has been said that it takes a saint to recognize a saint, a Christ to recognize a Christ. Only those fortunate ones who have this grace given to them by the Master can know his true greatness and realize who he really is. Contrary to reason. To average Westerners, even to those somewhat spiritually conditioned, the irrational methods which a perfect master uses often constitute a stumbling block to their acceptance of him. In the record of the life of Jesus, as it has come down to us, the daily intimate details of that perfect life are denied us. We have only the main facts of his activities and the essentials of his teachings, which was moreover largely for the masses. How the disciples themselves were trained, what they were intimately taught, has been given to us only in fragments. For this reason, we apt to think of Jesus as conforming more to a rational standard of perfection, But in this, I believe we are in error. Like Baba, like other perfect masters of whom I have heard or read, he too must often have bewildered the rational minds of his followers. Even as today, the deeper aspects of his spiritual teachings bewilder the average Christian. For instance, when he tells them to take no thought for morrow as to what they shall wear or eat. Do not most of the interpreters of his word try to explain that way? For the average man of body consciousness, bound hand and foot to the material world, this is an impossible command. Lovely poetry, but wholly impractical, we say, and relegated to a realm of fantasy. To illustrate the fact that a master functions on a plane far beyond three-dimensional consciousness, even beyond man-made ethics or morals, though in the highest sense virtuous, because he is never motivated by self-interest. Baba once related to his Western group the following story. If you read the life of Krishna, a perfect master of ancient days, you will find that he often said, did, and ordered things to be which seemed wholly contrary to common sense. He used to tell one thing to one person and contradictory things to another person. Sometimes he would give conflicting orders to different people at the same time. Krishna used to bluff, lie, and do all sorts of queer things, but solely for the upliftment of humanity. He was perfect and one in consciousness with God. So he found himself in everything and in everyone. Knowing the many diversified needs of man, he used different methods for different people. Similarly, I use illusion to draw my disciples out of illusion. The West does not properly understand this as the East does. When there is no self interest and no selfish motive, but only the intention of liberating others, whatever one may do will not bind him with egoistic chains or the others whom he would help. I have to use infinite means for my infinite work. So, whenever I tell you to do something, however unusual, you may be sure it is always for your highest good. Later, illustrating the importance of obedience on the part of the disciple, as well as the supra rational way the master often functions, Baba recounted a startling example of it. Once the master of Hafiz, the great Persian mystic, ordered one of his disciples to go home and kill the child. Hafiz was present and heard the order and began to wonder about it. But the man to whom the order was given simply thought that there must be some good reason for the master's order, so he went home at once and killed the child and brought the body to his master. All the while, Hafiz was thinking and wondering about the strange order, as were also other disciples. No one said anything. Then the master told Hafiz to bury the child and bury it deep. Hafiz did as he was ordered, and after burying it deep, in accordance with the Persian custom, he lit a candle and placed it over the grave. As he looked at the flame of the candle, he heard saying, I have been benefited. Then, to his astonishment, he saw the form of a child rise out of the candle flame. As Hafiz, in amazement, he then saw millions of child forms rising out of the candle flame. He was greatly puzzled. As he returned to his master, wherever he looked, he saw the forms of children. When Hafiz returned to the waiting group, the master now told the child's father to go and bring back the child whom he would find at home. The man, again without hesitation, without even wondering how the child could be home when he knew that he had killed him and that Hafiz had buried it, went off at once in compliance with the master's order. When he reached his home, there he found his child walking around the house quite well and happy, and he brought him to the master as instructed. Though an extreme example of the methods a master may use in order to show his disciples the illusory nature of this phenomenal world, it illustrates the unquestioning faith which a disciple should have for his master, and how utterly detached and obedient he is expected to be. So I think this should be through an extreme example. A comparable story of this same kind of implicit obedience is, of course, the Old Testament account of God's command to Abraham to offer his favorite son, Isaac, to him in sacrifice. In less drastic but none the less effective ways, we have seen how the Master, Baba, extracted from these early disciples the same quality of unquestioning obedience. And we have also seen how he used the circumstances of daily life to teach them to rise above egoistic tendencies into lives of selfless, loving usefulness. Life, he had told them, in the early days would not be a summer holiday, nor has it been. Yet, great have been the compensations for the trials they have had to undergo. And today, after many years, we find the great majority of the early ones still loving and serving the Master with all their hearts, minds, and souls, completely dedicated to his will and work. We are told by one of the early Indian disciples, Dr. Dhani, that Baba proved to be an uncompromising taskmaster and strict disciplinarian, and that his methods follow no spiritual pattern previously known to man. Yet, to his superhuman tact and forbearance, his compassion and unfailing love, Dr. Ghani pays full-hearted tribute. He also records that, though impossible to describe in detail, the inner transformation, the colossal reclamation of which the disciples are now subjectively aware, is an acknowledged fact with all of them. Ghani is my favorite. We were talking about him last week. Yeah. Yeah,
Karthik, if you want, I can continue from here. You must be ready.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Please.
Yeah.
Any thoughts
Chapter
before
5.
we get to Journey to the West? So I think what I'm surprised not surprised, what's interesting that I took away from this chapter is the fact that I think Baba realized this gap of not having a detailed account of the day-to-day experiences that disciples around Jesus had. And that's how we have this greater record that has been established through Lord Meher and, of course, the multiple biographies that have been written of Baba. So all that gives us a rich account of how life was and what he did. And of course, like Jean says in this book, there are many things that just don't add up to reason. And it's only with total surrender and 100% conviction one would just accept what one is dealt with or one is given by Baba, and that helps. Yeah.
Surrender is one of the important things, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, Jay Baba, this is Kama here. So, walking on the streets of Bombay, but the takeaway here is very significant. That is, the help of a perfect master is very important in the spiritual journey. So, irrespective of what plane one is in or whatever, and even for an ordinary aspirant who is not into knowledge and God speaks and all that, but if he loves the master, the guru, and as you said, love, obedience, surrender, sacrifice, I think this is where the word sacrifice gives us a practical example, So I think that what I look at it as like it's a spiritual formula for God realization or self realization is complete surrender and self sacrifice. to the master, whatever is demanded. So don't use one's ordinary mind to analyze why or what. Again, the Hafi sayings, which makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. So in a very simplified manner, 80% people in the world are basically more into bhakti yoga because it's very difficult to be an intellectual and use your mind to understand. Like Ramana Maharishi said, one is self-inquiry and one is self-surrender. And self-surrender is basically bhakti yoga, where you basically, just follow the guru's instructions and don't have to think about anything. Jai Baba.
One of the
Absolutely.
question was asked by my couple of friends like long time back. One of them friends. I was just discussing about the Meher Baba, and he was like asking me why. Okay, surrender is fine, sacrifice is fine, but why Meher Baba is asking to love him? What's the reason? Surrender, sacrifice, like follow the orders, but why to love? That's what he was asking. I didn't have the correct answer, but I said if you love him, if you take the continuous his name, the other thoughts will go away, and that might be one of the reason that he's asking us to love him, so that the other stuffs from in your mind will just go away.
I think what I understand about love is that in meditation, the reason you look at the Guru's and meditate is because the attributes, the qualities of the perfect master, because that is your own being. See, there is no difference between avatar and a regular is God realized. He was the first person to get God realized. And the Guru, avatar, God, what they call it, all of this
You have the
God consciousness state.
30-second
The important
problem,
thing here
Kama.
is
Your audio is bad after 30 seconds. Now it's better. Please continue.
sorry, maybe it's because of my walking. So what I feel is that this word love is misunderstood in many different ways. At least from my understanding, like I said, loving Baba is loving the self in everyone, which is where I keep coming up with my 7 awakenings, the my wish, 7 realities, and so on. So when Baba says, love me blindly, because faith, we know we have 3 kinds: faith in yourself, number 1, faith in the perfect master, and faith in life. The life is a stage on which the consciousness of the drop soul is playing this game, the game of duality. Of course, you take rest. The beauty is you have 8 hours of rest, where if you have deep sleep state, you are connected with the Paramatma and you have unconscious bliss. So in a way, that love is something very different for different people, depending on the degree of consciousness. At least for me now, it is not just about Baba, because Baba is in Nirguna Nirakar form. He's always around you. So you got to keep remembering him. That is one thing. And then you have to follow the postulates in your day-to-day life. That is for me is love, about relationships with the animate world and the inanimate world. Jai Baba.
So you mean love Baba means love to everything, love everything, whatever. That's what you mean to say, right?
Absolutely,
Love
absolutely.
yourself
Because
and everybody. Yes,
Baba is your own
absolutely.
self. Yes, the one in many ego personality self, not the many ego personality self in oneself. The one self in many has to be interpreted as the one universal self in many ego personality selves, because behind everybody's material body, you have the ego personality self. And the reality is that the realized self is the only real thing. And that can be called as divine love, or like the 7 realities: existence, truth, infinity, whatever, whatever works. That is why we have Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, and so on. So we can find the right kind of what I call template. And that is where the Guru helps. The Guru knows exactly what you need. So instead of going, with just going by the book, I think it's more important to having a guide, like it's like doing a PhD under the Nobel Prize winner, kind of thing, Jai Baba.
Okay, so
Does that
shall I continue, Karthik?
answer your question? Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Means like that was a question. Means maybe I didn't answer it correctly. I just given that wrong. Maybe not exactly correct direction, but yeah, that's the correct answer. And I really means like convinced with this answer. Loving Baba means like to it's a divine love. Yeah, it's to know everything.
But then I don't blame your friends because, quite honestly, that's one of the first things that I was surprised or uncomfortable with when it came to Baba and his messages, right? So I could not relate to it. And it took me a very long time, in fact, discourses to really understand what he's trying to say. So, yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead. So it's not an easy path. Coming to Baba is like hard work, man. Right?
Yes. Okay. Chapter
Okay, please
5.
continue.
Journey, Journey to the West. In the early days of the Bombay Ashram, in 1922, Baba had foretold many of the world happening in which we have been engulfed, as well as his own particular destiny in relation to them. War will break out again, he predicted, and it will be the worst holocaust the world has ever seen. Almost all the nations of the world will be drawn into it either military or economically. Later he added, my public manifestation will synchronize with the far end of this war which is coming. Both of my masters will give up their bodies before my outer work begins. I shall travel extensively, and my spiritual work will necessitate my going to the Western world. His journey to the Western world was now about to be fulfilled. On September 1st, 1931, Baba sailed for England with three disciples. Another prophecy of Baba's made 9 years before had been that he and Gandhi would meet on the board on his first trip to the West. Accordingly, when Baba's party had been aboard but a short time, they discovered that Gandhi was also a passenger. Later, one of the Gandhi's disciples relayed the message that his master would like very much to meet Baba. So it was arranged that he should go to Baba's cabin where they talk of spiritual matters. During the work, they met three or four times. While in London,
So, 1 second, if I can pause you. Both of my masters will give up their bodies before my outer work begins. So, here the references to Sai Baba and um, uh, Hazrat Baba Jan, correct?
Hazrat Babajan. Okay.
Right? They are the first two that drop the body, right? From a sequence standpoint. Because I think all the others were there for much more time. So,
While in London, many people came to see Baba and many reporters wrote sensational copy for their papers. But the important meeting were with those men and women who were destined to become his first Western disciples. Margaret Kraske, who had danced with Diaghilev Ballet and later had her own dancing school in London, gives her first impression of Baba, who she writes was to become the center of her life. He was standing at the foot of the steps leading to the front door, dressed in a thin white gown, a short furry coat, and pink turban, and he was looking at the house very quietly. He passed in through the door and gave me a smile in passing. A little later, I went in to see him. I was very nervous and did not know how to address him. But as soon as I entered the room, I was completely won over by the love which seemed to permeate his whole personality.
permeate,
He spilled out,
permeate
uh,
his
per-
whole person.
permeate his whole personality. He spelled out on the alphabet board, "It was your love that brought me," meaning, I suppose that he came to the West in response to the longing of those like myself who had heard of him and greatly desired to meet him. On the 4 days which I spent in Devonshire with him and the group, it is difficult to write. The whole time was invested with a dream like quality of pure love, timelessness, and great beauty. It was as if the curtain had been drawn aside and we were privileged to know and feel from our hearts who Baba is. I have not experienced anything quite like it since. We have passed through trials and tests which have deepened our faith in Baba and our love for him. But nothing since was quite equal the exquisite beauty of these 4 days. One of the first Englishman to become devoted to Baba was Kutain Toad, a gifted actor comedian whose spontaneous humor is ever a delight to the master. He says that prior to his meeting with Baba, he felt most unworthy, utterly unprepared, and rather shaken, as though he were about to undergo a major operation. But at last, the awaited moment came, and he found himself in the same room with Baba, who was seated cross legged on the bed near the window. There were several other people in the room, including one woman who was sitting opposite to Baba, crying softly. I only vaguely noticed them, Putin admitted. I was so engrossed in
I
looking
only
at this.
vaguely noticed. And Quentin is the guy. Quentin Todd.
Quentin admitted, I was so engrossed in looking at this wonderful man for the first time that everything else faded away. What impressed what impressed me most was his rather wild quality, as of something untamed, and his truly remarkable eyes. He smiled and motioned me to sit beside him. He took my hand and from time to time patted my shoulder. We sat for several minutes in silence, and I was aware of a great feeling of love and peace impending from him. Also, a curious feeling of recognition came to me as if I had found a long lost friend. Then Baba took my left hand, and some sort of wave of strength passed to me from him. It, it was as if an electric current of pure love were turned on, which filled me with ecstasy. I began to breathe deeply as if taking an anesthetic. Looking back on this experience, I am convinced that Baba meant me to feel his power. It was as if I had been baptized by him for future work. The feeling in me was that I must serve him in some way. There were many things I should have liked to ask him, but all questions seemed irrelevant and inadequate. Later, I felt that many of them were answered without words. My reaction to Baba was instantaneous, and I recognized him for what he is, a great prophet and teacher. Another who met Baba at this time was Delia De Leon, an actress who gives her first impressions upon meeting Baba. I was stunned with the wonder and beauty of him. I had seen his face before in my dreams. The eyes were startling in their beauty. The face seemed a luminous honey color, framed by a halo of long dark hair. His hands were most noticeable. They were strong, slim, and sensitive. During the week of his stay in London, I saw him every day. Time and place seemed not to exist. Everyone and everything faded from my mind except Baba. He alone seemed real, the perfect human being. Compared to him, everyone seemed like a shadow. He drew me irresistibly. His love melted me, and his humor and charm attracted me. His silence was more potent than words. When I look at the people passing me in the street, I thought Baba is in the world, and they do not fit. Now, how strange that this should be happening to me. From that moment, I gave my life into his keeping, and I knew that my spiritual search was at an end. Also, among the early English disciples were Will and Mary Beckett, who were later to go to India to be with Baba. Of her first meeting with him, Mary says that she felt a great upliftment of consciousness such as she had never experienced with anyone before. He gave me more, far more, in the space of 3 minutes than I had gained in 30 years of earnest seeking because I actually experienced that definite gift of grace and divine love that is bestowed, whereas others could only talk about it. These are but a few impressions of the many people who felt the wonder and the beauty of Baba's presence during those crowded weeks in England, like the Buddha. Questions propounded by newcomers, Baba will sometimes consent to answer, but like the
Can you,
Buddha.
can,
Sorry, Karthik.
no, can I request you to pause? Yeah. No, I was just saying those were
Okay.
very interesting experiences that were shared by all those public personalities. These are prominent public personalities that are mentioned in the previous section. Now, many times whenever I read these experiences, I feel how unlucky all of us are, or, that we did not get the gift of personal audience with Baba.
That
But
was in past
if you
life.
see, yes,
No,
Sanjay.
please don't say that ever.
Don't say.
that ever.
We have
Never,
not.
ever. Never, ever.
Correct. Correct.
Maybe you were one of them.
Correct.
Maybe you were one
None
of
of
them
us.
from
None of us
in
should say
in the
that.
last.
Yeah. Jai Baba.
But that's what. Anyway, the point I wanted to conclude was this one, right? This feeling, I'm sure many of us have got many times, right? Baba is in the world and they do not know it. How strange that this should be happening to me. This is a thought that I'm sure that all of us have experienced at one time or the other, right? So you have an intimate moment, your experience or a thought with Baba, and you instantly feel, wow, I'm able to have this joyous moment and experience with Baba, and the rest of the world is not able to share in it nor even realize it, right? So that's something I wanted to share as we were reading this section. But well made point, Sanjay ji. We should not let that bother us.
So like
Yeah,
the
let's
Buddha.
continue. Yeah.
So topic is like the Buddha. Questions propounded by newcomers, Baba will sometimes consent to answer, but like Buddha, he dislikes his disciples to ply him questions. The reason for this is easy to understand. It is Baba's function to help the disciple to still the conscious mind, not to stimulate it by intellectual cogitations. Yeah, this is also an important thing, Karthik, right? We should not
Yeah.
ask so many questions.
Yeah. So, but to get to that point, we need a lot of experiences and conviction, no? Till then, only questions,
Absolutely.
because that's what we are trained. We are trained to ask, and we are trained to think
Question.
that the human mind is capable of understanding everything. And hence, we think that, hey, we are not able to understand something, we ask 10 questions.
Yeah. Also, like Buddha, Baba rarely replies with a direct affirmative or negative to a question. Factual knowledge. So, dear To the intellectual mind must give place to the higher wisdom, which can seldom reply yes or no to a fundamental life question. But when Baba does consent to reply to questions, his answers are penetrating and concise. The following questions were asked him by James Douglas of the Sunday Express of London and appeared in that paper on April 10, 1932. Mr. Douglas states that he had been prepared a questionnaire with the help of Sir Denison Rhodes, the Oriental scholar. It was designated to trap the teacher, but smilingly
Design,
traded
design.
his.
It was designed
Yeah,
to
it
trap
was
the teacher.
sorry,
Design.
it was designed to trap the teacher, but smilingly threaded his way through it without stumbling. His mastery of dialectic is consummate. It was quite Socratic in its ease. He frequently put questions to me which startled me by their penetration, but he never evaded a direct question. The following are a few of the questions which were asked during the interview. Question: are you divine? Answer: I am one with God. I live in Him, like Buddha, like Jesus, like Krishna. They knew Him as I know Him. All men can know Him. Question: have you solved the problem of evil? Answer: there is no evil. There are only degrees of good. Question: what is your secret? Answer: the elimination of the ego. Question: do you believe in the Buddha and Eightfold Path? Answer: all religion is an ascent by stages to perfect union with God. Question: what religion is nearest to yours? Answer: all religions are revelations of one God. Question: is God a person or power? Answer: God is both personal and impersonal. He is in art, in literature, in science, in everything. Of the scores of interviews which Baba gave while he was in London, the following are few examples of his spiritual technique with newcomers. One woman, the daughter of a clergyman, confessed to Baba her lack of belief in him. She wished she might share the belief which others had regarding him. But why? Baba asked. Since, since what you really want is within yourself, you will find it only there. My part is to help you find it. Whether you believe in me or not, I will help you even if you don't want my help. When the sun is high in the heavens, you feel its warmth. Whenever you wish to or not. In bracket, in regard to his intimate disciples, brief in him is of course essential in as much as a perfect rapport must exist between master and disciple in order to facilitate the training for channelship. Bracket close. Another woman asked him how she could develop the realization of the divine within her soul. True spirituality can be attained, Baba explained, not by the intellect, but by heart and feeling by inner experience. I might explain for hours, but that will be as nothing compared to 1 second of my internal health. Do one thing every night just before retiring. Think for a moment. The infinite God is within me and I am part of infinite. This will strengthen your inner contact with me. To man, a psychologist who came to see him, Baba said, wonderful soul, you do not need an explanation of words. You understand that it is feeling that matters, not words. You will do great work for humanity. Another man asked Baba if certain person who claimed to be leading master had the right to such a claim, to which Baba replied that everyone has apparently the right to call himself whatever he likes. It is for others to accept or challenge it. the real test is not what he teaches, but what he lives. Someone asked him why. If he were the Christ, did everyone not accept him? To this, Baba replied, it is the human form which I must take that stands in the way of their recognition. Jesus was not acknowledged in his time, even by some of his own intimate and immediate companions, such as Judas. Though none of you understand me externally in my physical form, I am within you, within everybody, as the real infinite Christ. As the expiration of his stay in England, Baba made a flying visit to Constantinople and Milan. Then he sailed for America on his first visit, where he blessed the lives of many of us. He related the
As
beginning
related.
of his, as related at the beginning of the story.
Okay. Sanjay ji, are you in a position to read now? You can rotate. Um,
Yeah, I think I can read a bit. Signal is poor, so if you
Sure.
feel difficulty in listening, then you should switch over to somebody else.
I will let you know.
Yeah.
You're coming through very well right now. So start,
Okay.
and I'll rotate if required.
I
Jai
I
Baba.
can't see the screen. I don't know why.
Yeah. I switched it off. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. The fun
The
begins.
fun begins.
The months in between Baba's first and second visit to America were, on the whole, happy and busy ones. Preparing for his anticipated return visit in the spring, before leaving in December 1931, he had made certain stipulations which necessitated our raising a specific sum of money to further the establishment of retreats in Persia and India. Our difficulty in raising this sum was due to not solely to the apathy of most people towards ashrams in the Orient. The members of the small committee, which was formed for the purpose, found it extraordinarily difficult to coordinate their ideas and work them out harmoniously. The divine coordinator now being removed, the old egoistic desires began to remanifest themselves. We had been given a foretaste of the heavenly kingdom.
Foretaste.
Foretaste. Yeah, foretaste of the heavenly kingdom. But now we had to begin the work of integrating the higher consciousness into our daily lives. And being far removed from sainthood, we encountered many snags in ourselves and in others. Malcolm had been given the task of preparing the American public for Baba's return visit and imminent public manifestation, while I was placed in charge of the house, which our friend was continuing to lend us as a spiritual retreat. No doubt, to provide the tension which Baba uses so dramatically and effectively, he had privately told Malcolm that we were his chief agents in America and therefore in charge of his work. What he had told the others we never knew, but now, with more experience of Baba's unique methods, I would allow for the possibility that he might have told others the same tale, that they were in charge. Certainly, the difficulty we encountered when we tried to take any initiative on the committee would suggest such a probability. So we left the work of the committee to those in the city, which while we concentrated on our particular roles at the suburban retreat. Before leaving, Baba had outlined for me the schedule for our daily life there, stipulating certain times for meditation and specifying rules by which all those who lived in the house were to abide. Living with us were a mother and her daughter. The mother, according to Baba's instructions, was to help me with household duties, while the daughter was to assist Malcolm with his work of preparing the American public for Baba's return visit. It all seemed so simple and clear, with nothing arduous for any so for any. So I thought, so I thought. But on returning home from saying farewell to Baba, I ran right into my first snag. My helper greeted me practically at the front door with an impressive notebook in which she had written out her objections to all the duties which Baba had outlined for her and to which she had agreed. After listening in bewilderment while she objected herself out of all her household tasks, I turned inwardly to Baba, imploring his help. Like a flash came the thought, ask her what she really wants of life. This I did, and the most astonishing result, with the most astonishing result, he ceased at once her muddled thinking, gathered together her inner forces of concentration, and replied that she really wanted to serve her highest self. So, on that basis, we finally arrived at a harmonious and cooperative agreement in which she carried out Baba's directions. The first hurdle had been won. There were many others, not always so easily scaled, and in many of them, my part was very imperfectly fulfilled. It was an invaluable experience, though, and from it I learned at least one priceless lesson. If one has a leading part to play in any group activity and things for which one is responsible are not working out as well as they should, it is wise to ask oneself wherein one has failed before placing blame on others. However, obviously they may seem at fault. Finally, the great day of Baba's second arrival in America neared. We had been told that on this trip he would stay a long time, perhaps a year or more. We were related, and also word had been related to us that accommodation would have to be provided for hundreds of visitors, many of whom would be from out of town and would require sleeping accommodations. So my ever active mind got busy with this planning. Since we had plenty of unoccupied land all about us, I envisioned a tent colony which we would erect. The purchase of the tents were postponed until Baba's arrival, but I set immediately to work to improvise some tent furniture, dressing tables, shelves, seat outs of wooden fruit boxes, painted and decorated. They looked very gay and attractive, but to my knowledge, they were never used. When Baba arrived, he stayed 3 days in New York at a friend's house and exactly 2 nights at the Harmon Retreat before leaving for the West Coast. Thus are his disciples trained in fluidity. Fluidity, beautiful word.
Yeah, so much of work she did, and then Baba stayed
Yeah,
2 nights.
yeah. We journey
Bless you.
to.
Somebody is sneezing. Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
there is somebody passing by. He did. I think.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I'm at the balcony because inside the signal is very poor. Yeah.
So,
We
how long
journey.
are you in Mehrabad,
I
Pradeep?
am
Just the weekend?
there till Monday. Tuesday morning I leave.
Okay.
Fortunately for us, Malcolm and I were included in the party that traveled to California. Baba said at that time that wherever he went in America, we were to go with him. Malcolm had done well his job of preparing the American public for Baba's return. His arrival in New York made splashy headlines in all the important newspapers throughout the country. Not yet inured to Baba's shock technique, he secretly deplored, with many others, I am sure, the methods which a modern world teacher must employ if he wishes to stir the imagination and wonder, yes, even the opposition of the masses. Ever since then, we have been hearing the repercussions of his fanfare by really sincere people who assured us that true teachers from Orient don't do such things. And generally speaking, they are right. Baba just happens to be the notable exception who cuts through all precedents and prejudices. From the day he landed, when dozens of reporters interviewed and photographed him and his party throughout the 5 day journey came across the country, at every stop, he sacrificed himself graciously for the press. All the papers in the country proclaimed that silence Messiah. On the whole, the accounts were remarkably favorable to him, as if, in spite of themselves, the reporters had felt something of his spiritual radiation. But knowing so little of the nature of the God realized master, we, we in the Western world are very prone to laugh at such a claim. And of course, some of the news reports did just this. Many of us who winced at what seemed to us to be very vulgar, publicly wholly out of
Vulgar
keeping,
publicity.
vulgar
What seemed to be
publicity,
very vulgar publicity.
wholly out of keeping with the sublime character of master we loved and revered, thought wistfully of how different it must have been in Jesus' day. A gathering under the shade of an olive tree, hearts awakened, souls quickened, and then the glad news spread by word of mouth, with the gatherings growing gradually larger until one day the 5,000 were fed spiritual food on a verdant hillside in Judea, a different
Judea.
rhythm, Judea, a different rhythm, of course, of a different age. Yet, if we had lived in those days, might we not have heard the same criticism leveled against Jesus as now we encountered with Baba? Was he not stepping out the usual sedate character of the Jewish rabbi? Was he not
Rabbi.
steering? Yeah. Which was he
Rabbi
not
is nothing but a priest. It's
priest
just
of
two.
Jew
Yeah.
priest?
So Jewish rabbi. Yeah.
Was he not stirring up the rubble and defying on all sides of the traditional concept of how a religious teacher should behave? I do not see how it could be otherwise. Such a one always comes to free man from his antiquated notions and tribal values. Of necessity, he must specifically uproot man's reli- religious prejudices, shatter his crystallized viewpoints, even if it means making himself appear ridiculous or a trifle mad. The fun continues. Since Baba wastes no opportunities for eliminating his disciples' egos, it was quite in order that the long train trip should provide him with many occasions for a rendering this not always appreciated service. Playing one person against another is one of Baba's favorite and most effective techniques for compelling the parties concerned to face their shortcomings and shadows. On this journey, he pitted Malcolm against the Englishman Meredith Starr. Both would be asked to put into literary form Baba's message to Hollywood. Then Baba would accept Malcolm's version, praising it highly, while the other man, who prided himself on his writing ability and priority of place in Baba's group, would writhe and squirm. The result was that by the time we arrived in Hollywood, both Malcolm and I were persona non grata with Meredith Starr and his wife. Yet it was assigned to share a room with her in a hotel. I was, or it should be, I think, yes, I was, yet
Yes.
I was
Yes.
assigned
Yeah.
to share a room with her at a hotel. Her husband told us all that she was a saint. In certain respects, I think she was. Okay. All of us who had the privilege of being close to Baba have found that his treatment of us falls into two distinct places. In the beginning, in varying degrees, we are courted and some are even pampered until he knows the moment has come to turn on the reverse current. He starts in an earnest the real work of uprooting those egoistic tendencies which obscure the true self. In the period according to individual need, he often says and does things which puzzle and perhaps outrage us. Like a master surgeon, once he begins the operation, he keeps resolutely at it, regardless of how the patient rebels, until all the cankerous ego growth is eliminated. This particular man's star should have had enough experience of Baba's methods. He had been with him in India for almost a year to realize the nature of the therapeutic treatment to which Baba was subjecting him. But ultimately, his self interest blinded him. The result was that in subsequent months, he turned against the master whom he had formerly lauded from the house tops. To doubt his vociferous praise of Baba contained in it the seed of his Daniel. When Baba returned to India, he was greeted with a cable from Meredith Star in which he demanded from Baba 500,000, 500 pounds and God realization. Wow. Star's alternative was to declare Baba a fraud, which he which later he did. When Baba received this unique ultimatum, he laughed heartedly. I think uh, this for us, this is what Baba was directly doing in physical form, and you know, in the real sense. But I think we should treat that same thing he is doing to us also, right?
In the
So,
sense, I didn't
for,
understand.
I mean, we get this in our life now. Our messages, our egos getting
Yeah, yeah.
destroyed,
Initial
and we feel
pampering,
that I am the
then
most important
yeah,
person. I am most important person in the department on a
correct,
project. I should be
correct,
driving it. And somebody just
correct,
comes in and shelves the whole idea which you had,
correct,
you know, popped up, or you know. So
correct.
I think this is the learning for us too. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I can relate to so much of what Jean is saying. That's what I was saying. A
Yes.
lot of us have been through similar experiences, I'm sure. So on that note, we'll stop
Yeah.
here and I will stop recording. Um, any other thoughts before I stop recording? Any reactions to this? Lovely reading. Especially the Persian trip was something very interesting. And I look forward to retracing Baba's path sometime. I'm not big into
Yeah.
travel, but somehow Persia seems to be attracting me. Let's
Yeah.
see what happens. Jai Baba.
Yeah. And Cheel, as we read this book, I was not there for first hour, had to face this even
Mhm.
later. Yes, when we read
Okay.
this book, she had to really,
Mhm.
to the level of humiliation, I mean, mockery people made of her, that she
Okay.
proclaimed that Baba is coming, breaking up his silence and everything, and then he didn't even turn up to
Oh,
US as planned.
the famous
It-
bowl,
yeah.
Super Bowl announcement, then the
Yes,
Hollywood
yes, yes.
announcement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that
Yes.
she describes later in the book, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, Baba.
Yeah. Jai Baba. Jai Baba. All right. So I'll just stop.